The courtroom doors swung open, and I watched my husband Walter's face drain of every ounce of color God gave him. His lawyer, Mr. Henderson, stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open like a fish out of water. Walter gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. The woman walking down that aisle wasn't just any woman. She was Tasha Morgan, the mistress he'd been keeping for the past 12 years, the mother of his secret child. And she was walking straight toward my side of the courtroom, wearing a navy blue dress I knew Walter had bought her, carrying a folder thick enough to bury him under. "Your Honor," my lawyer Gloria Price stood up with the kind of smile that said she'd been waiting for this moment. "The petitioner would like to call her first witness." Walter finally found his voice. "Evelyn, what is this?" "What are you doing?" I looked at my husband of 42 years and felt nothing but ice in my chest. "I'm doing what you should have done a long time ago, Walter. I'm telling the truth." Before we continue, shout out to Dominique from Atlanta. We appreciate the love you show by commenting and sharing. Let me take you back to where this all started, 6 months before that courtroom. It was a regular Sunday morning in March. I had just turned 73 the week before, and Walter had taken me to Red Lobster like he always did. We'd been married since 1983, raised 2 beautiful children together, and settled into what I thought was a comfortable retirement. Walter had been a supervisor at the Ford plant for 30 years before he retired. I'd worked as a nurse at Mercy Hospital until my knees couldn't take the 12-hour shifts anymore. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had our house paid off, a decent savings account, and both our pensions coming in steady. Our children, Danielle and Marcus Jr., were grown with families of their own. Life was supposed to be peaceful now. That Sunday, I was getting ready for service at Greater Faith Baptist when my phone buzzed. It was a text from our bank. "Your checking account is overdrawn by $3,200. I stared at that message like it was written in another language. Overdrawn? We had over $20,000 in that account last I checked. I handled all our bills online and I knew exactly how much we had. My hands were shaking when I opened the banking app. The screen loaded slow as molasses, and each second felt like an hour. When I finally saw the transactions, my stomach dropped. Transfers. Dozens and dozens of transfers to an account I didn't recognize. 500 here, 800 there. Some as large as $2,000. They went back months, maybe years. I scrolled and scrolled, and the numbers just kept coming. I sat down on the edge of our bed, the same bed Walter and I had shared for 4 decades, and I felt something inside me crack. "Baby, you almost ready?" Walter called from downstairs. "Service starts in 30 minutes. I looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was done, pressed and curled the way I'd been wearing it since the 70s. My Sunday dress was a soft purple, my favorite color. I looked like myself, but I felt like a stranger. "I'm not feeling well," I called back. "You go on without me." Walter came upstairs, concern all over his face. The same face I'd woken up next to for 42 years. The face I'd trusted with everything. "You all right, Evie? You need me to stay home?" Evie. He'd called me that since our second date in 1981. We'd met at a church fish fry, and he'd asked me to dance to Al Green. I'd thought he was the finest man I'd ever seen. "No, I'm fine. Just a headache. You go on." He kissed my forehead and left. I heard his car pull out of the driveway, and then I got to work. I wasn't some fool who didn't know how to use a computer. I'd taken classes at the senior center. I knew how to search for things. I started with that account number, but it was registered to a business name I didn't recognize. Then I went through Walter's emails. He thought he was slick, having a separate email address I didn't know about. But Walter had always been predictable. His passwords were always the same, some combination of his mama's name and a number. I tried Dorothy turn 43, and just like that, I was in. The first email I opened made my chest hurt. "Baby, thank you for the money for Jaden's basketball camp. He's so excited. I love you." Jaden, a child. Walter had a child. I spent the next 4 hours reading through years of emails. Pictures of a little boy who looked just like my Walter. Birthday parties I'd never been invited to. School events Walter had attended while telling me he was at the casino with his boys. Christmas mornings where this child opened gifts my husband had bought with our money. There were emails to Tasha about rent payments, car payments, medical bills. Walter had been living a whole other life, and I'd been helping him pay for it with money from our joint account. The boy, Jaden, was 11 years old. 11. Which meant Walter had started this affair when he was 62 years old, and I was 61. We'd just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary that year. I remembered the party our children threw us, the photos of us cutting the cake, Walter's speech about how I was the love of his life. All lies. I found receipts, too, jewelry I'd never seen, a vacation to Miami I'd never taken, dinners at restaurants Walter said he couldn't afford when I asked to go out. My phone rang. It was my best friend Loretta from church. I let it go to voicemail. Then it was my daughter Danielle. Then my son Marcus. I ignored them all. When Walter came home from church, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open and every bank statement from the past 3 years printed out and spread across the table. Evelyn? He stood in the doorway, still in his suit. What's all this? Sit down, Walter. Something in my voice must have warned him because his face changed. The concern disappeared, and what replaced it was guilt. Pure, unmistakable guilt. Who is Tasha Morgan? I asked, my voice steady as stone. Walter's mouth opened and closed. He loosened his tie like it was choking him. Who is Jaden Thompson? Evie, let me explain. Don't you dare call me that. My voice was still calm, but inside I was screaming. You lost the right to call me that the first time you put your lips on that woman, the first time you spent our money on your secret child. So you sit down and you tell me the truth, or you get out of my house right now. Walter sat, and then, like the coward he was, he started crying. He told me everything. How he'd met Tasha at a bar when he was supposed to be at a retirement party for someone from the plant. How one night turned into 2, then regular meetings. How she got pregnant, and he couldn't bring himself to leave me. How he'd been supporting them both for over a decade. I love you, Evie. I never stopped loving you. I made a mistake. A mistake. A 42-year marriage reduced to a mistake. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house. Evelyn, please. I said get out. Walter grabbed his keys and left. I sat at that kitchen table until the sun went down and the house got dark around me. Then I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Gloria Price, a lawyer from church who'd been after me for years to join her book club. The second was to my bank to freeze our joint accounts. The third was to Loretta, and when I heard her voice, I finally let myself cry. The next few weeks were a blur. Walter moved in with his brother, calling me every day, begging me to talk to him. Our children came by, upset and confused. Danielle cried. Marcus wanted to fight his father. I held them both and told them I'd be okay, even though I didn't know if that was true. Gloria was a godsend. She got me copies of everything: bank records, emails, text messages. We built a case that showed Walter had stolen over $200,000 from our joint accounts over the past 12 years. Money that should have been ours in retirement. Money that should have gone to our grandchildren's college funds. But Gloria told me something that made my blood run cold. In court, Walter's going to say he was supporting his child. That's his legal right. He might even get sympathy from the judge. Men like him, they know how to play the victim. That's when I got the idea. It came to me during my morning prayer time when I was asking God to give me strength. If Walter was going to play the victim, I needed someone who could tell the real story. Someone who'd been there. Someone who knew the truth about how Walter had made promises to both of us. I needed Tasha. Finding her wasn't hard. Her address was in Walter's emails. I drove to her apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. It was a nice place in a decent neighborhood, nicer than what Walter and I could have afforded when we were young, paid for with our money. When Tasha opened the door, we stared at each other for a long moment. She was younger than me by maybe 20 years, pretty in a way that reminded me of the singers Walter used to like. I could see why he'd been attracted to her. "Mrs. Thompson," she said quietly, "I wondered when you'd come." "We need to talk." She let me in. Her apartment was clean, decorated with pictures of Jaden. I saw one of Walter with his arm around the boy, both of them smiling at a baseball game. It felt like looking at a family photo album that I should have been in. "I know you probably hate me," Tasha said, sitting across from me on her couch. "I deserve that." "I don't hate you," I said, surprising myself. "I hate what happened, but I need to know the truth. All of it." And she told me. How Walter had promised to leave me. How he'd said his marriage was over in everything but name. How he'd promised to marry her once I found someone else. How he'd bought her things and taken her places, always saying it was their secret. How he'd been there when Jaden was born. How he'd cut the umbilical cord and cried. How he'd told her the same pretty lies he'd told me 42 years ago. "Why are you here, Mrs. Thompson?" Tasha asked finally. "Because Walter's trying to take everything from me in the divorce, and I think it's time everyone knew the truth about what kind of man he really is." I laid out my plan. It was risky, maybe even a little crazy, but Tasha listened, her eyes getting wider with each word. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "He told me he loved me," she said softly. "He told me we were building a life together. But he never left you. Not really. And when I got pregnant, he begged me not to tell anyone, said it would ruin him, so I kept his secret. I've been keeping it for 12 years. I'm not asking you to do this for me," I said. "I'm asking you to do it for every woman he's lied to, for every promise he's broken." Tasha looked at the picture of Jaden on her wall. "What happens to my son if I do this?" "Your son gets a father who has to face what he's done, and you get the truth on record. Legal proof that Walter's been supporting you both. That's worth something." She thought about it for 3 days. Then she called me and said one word. "Yes." We met with Gloria together, and the three of us built our strategy. Walter thought he was going to walk into that divorce hearing and paint me as an angry, bitter old woman who couldn't forgive one mistake. He thought he'd get away with a 50-50 split and walk away with his dignity. He had no idea what was coming. The morning of the final hearing, I put on my best dress. It was the same purple I'd been wearing that Sunday when my world fell apart. Loretta drove me to the courthouse, holding my hand the whole way. "You sure about this, Evie?" she asked. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Walter was already there with his lawyer, looking confident. He even smiled at me, like he thought we could still work this out, like 42 years meant he'd always have a hold on my heart. The judge called us to order. Walter's lawyer started with his opening statement, talking about how Walter had been a devoted husband who'd made one mistake, how he deserved to keep what he'd worked for, how I was being vindictive. Then Gloria stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to call our first witness." That's when the doors opened. That's when Tasha walked in. That's when Walter's whole world came crashing down around him. And that's when I knew, without a doubt, that I was going to win. Tasha took the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Walter was whispering frantically to his lawyer, his face pale as ash. The judge was watching with interest, her eyebrows raised. Gloria approached the witness stand with a warm smile. "Ms. Morgan, can you please state your relationship to the defendant, Walter Thompson?" Tasha looked directly at Walter, and her voice was clear as a bell. Walter Thompson is the father of my 11-year-old son, Jaden, and he's been my partner for the past 12 years. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Walter's lawyer was on his feet, objecting to everything and nothing. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back. The judge banged her gavel 3 more times before the courtroom settled down. Walter looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. His lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was shuffling through papers like he might find a miracle hidden in there somewhere. "Order," Judge Patricia Williams said firmly. She was a black woman in her 50s, with gray locks pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Ms. Morgan, please continue." Gloria nodded at Tasha, who took a deep breath. I watched her hands trembling slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "Walter and I met in June of 2013 at Riley's bar on Jefferson Avenue. He told me he was separated from his wife, that the marriage had been over for years but they stayed together for appearances. He said he was lonely and just needed someone to talk to." I felt my chest tighten. June 2013. That was the summer our grandson Timothy was born. I remembered Walter being distant, saying he needed space to process getting older. I'd given him that space, like a fool. "We started seeing each other regularly," Tasha continued. "He'd come to my apartment 2, sometimes 3 times a week. He bought me gifts, took me to dinner, told me he loved me. When I got pregnant in 2014, I was scared. But Walter said he was happy. He said he'd always wanted another child, and this was his second chance." Walter's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, I fail to see how this is relevant to the division of marital assets." "Sit down, Mr. Henderson," Judge Williams said coldly. "I'll decide what's relevant in my courtroom." Gloria walked over to her table and picked up a thick folder. "Your Honor, we have bank statements showing regular transfers from the joint account of Mr. and Mrs. Thompson to Ms. Morgan's account. These transfers total over $200,000 over a 12-year period." She handed copies to the judge and to Walter's lawyer. I watched Mr. Henderson's face fall as he flipped through the pages. "Ms. Morgan," Gloria continued, "can you tell us what these payments were for?" "Rent," Tasha said. "Walter paid my rent every month. $1,500, then $1,800 when I moved to a bigger place. He also paid for Jaden's daycare, his school supplies, his clothes. He gave me money for groceries, utilities, doctor visits. Sometimes he'd give me extra, just because. He said he wanted to take care of us." "And did Mrs. Thompson know about these payments?" "No. Walter told me his wife didn't need to know. He said the money was his to spend how he wanted, that he'd earned it working all those years." I gripped the edge of my chair. Our money. Money I'd earned too, working night shifts as a nurse while raising 2 children. Money I'd saved by clipping coupons and shopping sales. Money that should have been for our retirement, for our grandchildren, for the life we'd built together. "Ms. Morgan, did Mr. Thompson make any promises to you about the future?" Gloria asked. Tasha's eyes filled with tears. "He said he was going to leave his wife. He said it over and over for years. Soon, baby. Just give me a little more time. I need to make sure the timing's right. He said he loved me." He said Jaden deserved to have his father full-time, not just stolen moments. "And did he ever leave Mrs. Thompson?" "No." The word hung in the air like smoke. Gloria pulled out another document. "Your Honor, we also have text messages between Mr. Thompson and Ms. Morgan. In these messages, Mr. Thompson repeatedly promises to leave his wife, tells Ms. Morgan he loves her, and discusses their future together. All while he was still living with Mrs. Thompson and presenting himself as a devoted husband." The judge read through the messages, her expression hardening with each page. Walter was slumped in his chair now, his expensive suit looking 2 sizes too big on him. "Mr. Henderson," Judge Williams said, "does your client have anything to say about this?" Walter's lawyer whispered something to him. Walter shook his head. Then he stood up, and I saw something in his face that I'd never seen before. Desperation. "Your Honor, I made mistakes. I know that, but I never stopped loving my wife. I was confused. I was going through a crisis. I didn't know how to handle it. Judge Williams fixed him with a stare that could freeze water. Mr. Thompson, you're 74 years old. You had a 12-year affair, fathered a child, and spent over $200,000 of marital assets without your wife's knowledge or consent. That's not confusion. That's betrayal. Walter opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Gloria wasn't finished. Your Honor, we'd like to present additional evidence. Mrs. Thompson has discovered that her husband also took out a second mortgage on their home without her knowledge. The funds from that mortgage, $50,000, were used to buy a car for Miss Morgan. My head snapped up. A second mortgage? On our house? Gloria slid more papers across to the judge. Mr. Thompson forged Mrs. Thompson's signature on these documents. We have a handwriting expert ready to testify to that fact. The courtroom started spinning. Walter had forged my signature. He'd put our home at risk. The home we'd bought in 1985, where we'd raised our babies, where we'd celebrated every holiday and milestone. He'd risked losing it all for his mistress. I'm going to need a recess, Judge Williams said. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. Gloria, Loretta, and I went to a small conference room down the hall. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. You did good, Evie, Loretta said, rubbing my back. You're doing real good. I can't believe he forged my signature, I whispered. That's our home, Gloria. What if we lose it? We're not going to lose it, Gloria said firmly. What he did was fraud. The mortgage company will have to void that loan. But more importantly, the judge now sees exactly what kind of man Walter is. There was a knock on the door. It was Tasha. Can I come in? She asked quietly. I nodded. She sat down across from me, and for a long moment we just looked at each other. I'm sorry, she said. I know that doesn't mean much, but I am. I should have known better. I should have checked his story. But I wanted to believe him so badly. I wanted Jaden to have a father. Did Jaden know? I asked. About Walter being married? Tasha shook her head. No. I told him his father worked a lot, traveled for business. I couldn't bear to tell him the truth, that his father chose another family over us every single day. Something in her voice made me see her differently. She wasn't the enemy. She was another woman Walter had lied to, used, and discarded when it was convenient. What are you going to do now? I asked. I don't know, Tasha admitted. Walter stopped sending money 2 months ago when you filed for divorce. I'm behind on rent. Jaden needs new shoes. I've been picking up extra shifts at work, but it's not enough. What do you do? I'm a medical assistant at the clinic on Hamilton Street. I thought about all those years I'd worked as a nurse, how hard it was to make ends meet, how Walter had always complained about money being tight while secretly funding a whole other life. After this is over, I said slowly, you and I need to talk about what Walter owes you, for Jaden, not as his mistress, but as the mother of his child. That boy deserves support, and you deserve compensation for 12 years of lies. Tasha's eyes widened. You'd help me? I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it because it's right, and because Walter needs to face every single consequence of what he's done. When we returned to the courtroom, Walter looked worse than before. His brother Jerome had shown up and was sitting in the back row, shaking his head in disgust. Our daughter Danielle was there too, her face red from crying. She wouldn't even look at her father. Judge Williams called the court back to order. I've reviewed the evidence presented, and I have some questions for Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, please take the stand. Walter's hands were shaking as he was sworn in. His lawyer looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Mr. Thompson, the judge began, did you forge your wife's signature on mortgage documents? Walter cleared his throat. Your Honor, I needed the money. We had the equity in the house, and I thought... That's a yes or no question, Mr. Thompson. Yes, he whispered. Did you spend over $200,000 of marital funds on an extramarital affair without your wife's knowledge? Yes. Did you lie to Ms. Morgan about leaving your wife? Walter glanced at Tasha, then at me. Yes. Did you lie to your wife about where you were going and what you were spending money on for 12 years? Yes. Judge Williams leaned back in her chair. Mr. Thompson, in my 30 years on the bench, I've seen a lot of bad behavior, but what you've done here is particularly egregious. You didn't just have an affair. You systematically defrauded your wife, endangered her financial security, and violated her trust in the most fundamental ways possible. Walter's lawyer tried to interrupt. Your Honor, my client has admitted his mistakes. Your client committed fraud, Mr. Henderson. Multiple counts. Mrs. Thompson would be well within her rights to file criminal charges. My heart was pounding. Criminal charges? I hadn't even thought about that. Gloria stood up. Your Honor, Mrs. Thompson isn't interested in seeing her husband incarcerated. She simply wants what's rightfully hers, and compensation for the years of deception and financial abuse. Financial abuse, the judge repeated. That's exactly what this is. Mr. Thompson, you spent your wife's money, forged her signature, and put her home at risk, all while making her believe you were a faithful husband. That's abuse. I watched Walter's face crumble. He was crying now, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. Part of me felt satisfaction, but another part just felt tired. Tired of the lies, tired of the pain, tired of loving someone who'd never really loved me back. I want to hear from Mrs. Thompson, Judge Williams said, looking at me. Mrs. Thompson, would you like to address the court? Gloria nodded at me encouragingly. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky, and walked to the witness stand. After I was sworn in, I looked directly at Walter. 42 years, I said, my voice steady. That's how long we were married. 42 years of cooking your meals, washing your clothes, taking care of you when you were sick. 42 years of believing every word you said. You told me you loved me. You held my hand at church. You smiled at me across the dinner table. And all that time, you were lying. Walter couldn't meet my eyes. The money hurts, I continued. God knows it does. That was our retirement, our security. But what hurts more is knowing that every time you said I love you, you were thinking about her. Every time you held me, you were wishing you were somewhere else. I gave you everything, Walter, and you threw it away like it meant nothing. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I don't want revenge. I want justice. I want what I earned in this marriage. I want security in my old age. And I want Walter to understand that actions have consequences. Judge Williams nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. You may step down. As I walked back to my seat, I felt something shift inside me. For months, I'd been carrying around this weight of betrayal and hurt. But standing up there, speaking my truth, I felt some of that weight lift. The judge addressed both lawyers. I'm going to take this case under advisement, but I'll tell you right now, Mr. Henderson, your client is in serious trouble. We'll reconvene in 1 week for my final ruling. Court dismissed. The gavel came down. Gloria squeezed my hand. Loretta hugged me tight. And as we walked out of that courtroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. But as we reached the parking lot, Walter's brother Jerome caught up with us. Evelyn, wait, please. I turned around. Jerome looked exhausted, his face lined with worry. I need to tell you something, he said, glancing around nervously. Something Walter doesn't know I know. Gloria stepped forward. What is it, Mr. Thompson? Jerome pulled out his phone and showed us a photo. It was Walter with another woman, younger than Tasha, outside a restaurant. They were holding hands. This was taken 3 weeks ago, Jerome said quietly. I think there's more than just Tasha. I think there might be another one. The ground seemed to tilt under my feet. Another one? How many lives had Walter been living? But before I could process it, my phone rang. It was my son Marcus, and his voice was frantic. "Mom, where are you? You need to get to the hospital right now. It's Dad. He collapsed in the parking lot. They think it's his heart." I stood in that parking lot, phone pressed to my ear, and felt the whole world pause. Walter had collapsed. His heart. The man I'd loved for 42 years was in the hospital, and I was supposed to rush to his side like I always had. "Mom, did you hear me?" Marcus's voice cracked. "The ambulance just left. I'm following them to Mercy Hospital. Please come." Mercy Hospital. The same place I'd worked for 30 years. The same place where I'd delivered both my children. Where I'd held Walter's hand when his mother died. Where our life together had so many memories. Gloria touched my arm. "Evelyn, you don't have to go if you're not ready." Loretta was already opening her car door. "I'll drive you, baby, whatever you decide." I looked at Jerome, still holding his phone with that photo of Walter and the mystery woman. Then I looked at Tasha, who was standing by her car looking lost and scared. "Is Jaden with you?" I asked her. She shook her head. "He's at my mother's house. I didn't want him to miss school." "Good," I said. Then I made a decision that surprised even me. "Tasha, you should go to the hospital. That's Jaden's father. Whatever else Walter is, he's that boy's daddy. If something happens to him, Jaden deserves to have been there." Tasha's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Jerome, you go too. He's your brother." "What about you?" Gloria asked gently. I thought about all those years of being the dutiful wife, of dropping everything when Walter needed me, of putting his needs before my own, over and over again, until I'd forgotten what my own needs even were. "I'll come," I said finally. "But I'm not rushing, and I'm not going to fall apart. Those days are over." We drove to Mercy Hospital in Loretta's car. She kept the radio on low, playing gospel music. Yolanda Adams was singing "Open My Heart," and I felt every word of that song settle into my bones. When we arrived, Marcus met us in the emergency room waiting area. His eyes were red, and he pulled me into a hug that nearly crushed my ribs. "They're running tests," he said. "They think it might be a heart attack. Dad's conscious, but he keeps asking for you." "Where's your sister?" "Danielle's with the kids. She said she can't face him right now." I understood that. Our daughter was taking this hard. She'd always been a daddy's girl, and finding out what he'd done had broken something in her. Tasha and Jerome arrived a few minutes later. Marcus's face hardened when he saw Tasha. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. "Marcus," I said firmly. "Not now. Not here." A doctor came out. Dr. Okonkwo. A woman I'd worked with years ago. She smiled when she saw me. "Evelyn Thompson! I thought that was your husband. How are you?" "I'm managing, Keisha. How is he?" Her smile faded. "He had a cardiac event, but we caught it in time. No heart attack, but his blood pressure was dangerously high. We're going to keep him overnight for observation. The stress of whatever he's been dealing with isn't helping his health." The stress of getting caught, I thought. "Can I see him?" I asked. "Of course. He's in room 214. But Evelyn..." She lowered her voice. "Take care of yourself, too. I heard through the grapevine what's been happening. You don't owe him anything." I patted her hand. "Thank you, baby." The walk to room 214 felt like walking through memories. These halls where I'd spent so many years helping people, saving lives, making a difference. I'd been good at my job. I'd been respected. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that strength when I was at home with Walter. Walter was in the bed, hooked up to monitors, looking small and old. When he saw me, fresh tears started rolling down his cheeks. "Evie," he whispered, "you came." "I came," I said, staying by the door. "But not for the reasons you think." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was going to die, and all I could think was that I'd ruined everything. I'd lost you." I'd lost the best thing that ever happened to me. I walked closer to the bed but didn't touch him. Walter, do you even understand what you did? Do you really get it? I lied to you. I cheated. I took our money. You stole my dignity, I interrupted. You made me look like a fool. For 12 years, you let me believe we were happy while you were building another life. You risked our home, our security, everything we'd worked for. And according to your brother, Tasha might not even be the only one. Walter's eyes widened. Jerome told you about that? So it was true. There was another woman. How many, Walter? How many women have there been? He closed his eyes. 2. Just 2. The other one, it wasn't serious. Just a few months, over a year ago. I ended it. Just 2. Like that made it better. Like betraying me with 2 women instead of 1 was somehow less horrible. Tasha's outside, I said. She's worried about you. She brought herself here because she thinks you're going to die, and she wants Jaden to have said goodbye. That woman believed your lies, Walter. She wasted 12 years waiting for you to choose her. And you never did. I couldn't leave you, Walter said desperately. I tried to end it so many times, but I couldn't. I love you, Evie. I've always loved you. No, I said, and my voice was strong and clear. You loved having 2 lives. You loved the excitement of sneaking around. You loved feeling like a young man again with Tasha, while still having the comfort and security of me at home. That's not love, Walter. That's selfishness. A nurse came in to check his vitals. I stepped back and let her work. When she left, Walter reached out his hand toward me. Please, Evie. Please forgive me. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything. I looked at his hand, the same hand that had held mine on our wedding day, the hand that had held our babies, the hand that had wiped my tears when my mother passed, the hand that had signed documents forging my signature. I didn't take it. I forgive you, I said quietly. Not for you, but for me. Because carrying around all this hate and hurt is too heavy. But forgiving you doesn't mean taking you back. Some things can't be fixed, Walter. Some things are just broken. I walked to the door, then turned back. Tasha's going to come in and see you. You're going to tell her the truth, all of it, about the other woman, about the money being gone, about how you never really planned to leave me. And then you're going to figure out how to support your son because Jaden didn't ask for any of this. Where are you going? Walter asked, panic in his voice. I'm going home, to my house, and next week I'm going to court to hear the judge's ruling. And then I'm going to figure out how to build a life that's just mine. Something you can't touch, something you can't ruin. I walked out of that hospital room and didn't look back. In the waiting area, I told Tasha she could see him. Marcus and Jerome came with me to the parking lot. Mom, Marcus said, you can stay with me and Angela for a while. You don't have to be in that house alone. Baby, I appreciate it, but I need to be alone. I need to figure out who I am without being Walter's wife. The next week crawled by. Our children came to check on me every day. The ladies from church brought food and sat with me. My phone rang constantly with people who'd heard what happened and wanted to offer support. Gloria called to tell me the judge had scheduled the final hearing for Friday morning at 10. When Friday came, I put on a different dress. This one was red. My mama always said red was the color of power and passion. I needed both today. The courtroom was packed. Walter was there, looking thinner and tired. Tasha sat in the back row. Our children sat behind me. Half the congregation from Greater Faith Baptist was there too, including Pastor Williams, who'd married Walter and me 42 years ago. Judge Williams came in, and everyone stood. When we sat back down, the room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I've reviewed all the evidence in this case, the judge began, and I want to say, for the record, that this is one of the most clear-cut cases of financial fraud and emotional abuse I've seen in my courtroom. Walter's lawyer started to stand, but the judge waved him down. "Mr. Thompson, you systematically deceived your wife for 12 years. You stole over $200,000 from joint accounts. You forged her signature on legal documents. You put her home at risk, and you showed absolutely no remorse until you were caught." The judge looked at her papers. "Therefore, I am ruling as follows. The marital home will go entirely to Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Thompson will be responsible for paying off the fraudulent second mortgage. Mrs. Thompson will receive 75% of all retirement accounts and pensions. Mr. Thompson will pay spousal support of $3,000 per month until Mrs. Thompson's death or remarriage." Walter's face went white. His lawyer was scribbling frantically. "Furthermore," Judge Williams continued, "I am ordering Mr. Thompson to establish a formal child support arrangement with Ms. Morgan for the benefit of his minor son. Ms. Morgan, you'll need to file the appropriate paperwork, but based on Mr. Thompson's income, I estimate support should be around $1,500 per month." Tasha gasped. I turned and saw her crying quietly, her hand over her mouth. "Mr. Thompson, you're lucky Mrs. Thompson chose not to press criminal charges for the forgery. I suggest you count your blessings and start making amends for what you've done." Court dismissed. The gavel came down. Gloria hugged me tight. "We won, Evelyn. We won everything." People crowded around me, congratulating me, hugging me, crying with me. I felt overwhelmed by all the love in that room. But then I saw Walter, sitting alone at his table, his lawyer packing up to leave. He looked like a broken man. And despite everything, despite all the pain he'd caused, I felt a tiny flicker of sadness for him. Not enough to change my mind, but enough to remind me that he was still human. I walked over to him. "Walter." He looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "You got everything you wanted." "I got what I deserved," I corrected. "There's a difference." "What am I supposed to do now, Evie?" I thought about that question. Then I said, "You're going to get a job if you don't have one. You're going to pay your debts. You're going to be a real father to Jaden, not just someone who sends checks. And you're going to live with what you've done. That's what you do now." I turned to walk away, then paused. "And Walter? You're going to learn that love isn't about having everything you want. It's about cherishing what you have. You had something precious, and you threw it away. Don't make that mistake again." 2 months later, I was sitting on my front porch with Loretta, drinking sweet tea and watching the sunset. The house was mine now, truly mine. I'd redecorated Walter's office into a craft room. I'd changed the locks. I'd started taking art classes at the senior center. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tasha. "Thank you for encouraging me to file for child support. Jaden's going to a better school now, and we're finally stable. I know we're not friends, but I'm grateful for your kindness." I texted back, "Take care of that boy. He deserves the best." Danielle's car pulled up, and my grandchildren came running up the walkway. Grandma, can we sleep over tonight?" "Of course you can, babies. I made cookies." As they ran inside, Danielle hugged me. "You look happy, Mom. Really happy." "I am, baby. For the first time in a long time, I'm happy." That night, after the grandchildren were asleep, I sat in my bedroom, not our bedroom, and thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal had almost destroyed me. But somehow, in the destruction, I'd found pieces of myself I'd forgotten existed. I was Evelyn Thompson, but I wasn't just Walter's wife anymore. I was a woman who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger. I was a grandmother, a friend, an artist, a fighter. I was someone who'd chosen herself when it mattered most. Walter called sometimes, usually late at night. I didn't answer. He left voicemails apologizing, begging for another chance. I deleted them without listening all the way through. I heard through Marcus that Walter had gotten a part-time job at Home Depot, that he was actually showing up for Jaden's basketball games, that he'd moved into a small apartment and was living on a budget for the first time in years. Good, I thought. Let him learn what struggle feels like. Let him understand what he put me through. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was at church when Pastor Williams made an announcement. We have a new member joining our women's ministry leadership team. Sister Evelyn Thompson has agreed to lead our financial literacy workshops for young women. She's going to teach them about protecting their assets, understanding their rights, and building their own financial independence. The congregation applauded. I stood up and waved, feeling proud and purposeful. After service, a young woman approached me. She was about Tasha's age, with sad eyes. "Mrs. Thompson? I heard about your story, and I think my husband might be doing the same thing to me. Can we talk?" I took her hand. "Of course we can, baby. Let's get some coffee." As we walked out of the church together, I realized this was my purpose now, to help other women see the signs I'd missed, to help them protect themselves, to help them find their strength before it was too late. I'd lost 42 years to a lie, but I had plenty of life left to live in truth. A year after the divorce, I was in my craft room painting when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jerome standing there with a casserole dish. "From Walter," he said quietly. "It's your birthday. He wanted you to have your favorite meal." I looked at the dish, chicken and dumplings, made the way I'd taught Walter years ago. For a moment, I felt a twinge of something. Not love, not quite. Maybe nostalgia for what could have been. "Thank you, Jerome. But you can take this back. Tell Walter I appreciate the thought, but I'm cooking for myself now, and I like my recipes better." Jerome smiled. "You know, Evie, you're the strongest woman I know. Walter was a fool to lose you." "Yes, he was," I agreed. "But I'm grateful he did, because I never would have found myself if I'd stayed lost in him." That evening, I celebrated my 75th birthday surrounded by my children, my grandchildren, Loretta, Gloria, and a whole room full of women from church. We ate cake, laughed until we cried, and danced to old Motown songs. As I looked around at all the love in my living room, I realized something important. Walter had taken a lot from me, but he hadn't taken everything. He hadn't taken my ability to love, to trust, to hope, to build new relationships. I was free. Not because a judge said so, but because I'd chosen to be. And that freedom was worth more than any amount of money, any house, any marriage certificate. I was Evelyn Thompson, 75 years young, and my life was just beginning. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.